the federal government's use of power. Currently, Americans believe Trump exercises too much power. So here's what some Utahns think. So a majority of U.S. voters think that the American presidency is exercising too much power, while fewer than 1 in 10 think the president isn't wielding enough, according to the new Deseret News Hinckley Institute of Politics poll. So before I read further, first and foremost, I just want to say the funny thing to me here is the majority of people are going to have one or two issues on their mind that they think he is exercising too much power in. Now, there's going to be some people that say, just everything he's doing is exercising too much power. And to be honest, I'm going to take those people as not serious. Is he utilizing the power that he believes he has been granted by the Constitution? Yes. Is he overstepping his bounds? We'll see through the court system. I'm not going to make too much of a judgment there. The people who feel here, while fewer than 1 in 10 think the president is wielding enough power, to be honest, I think a lot of them feel that that's probably in something specific. And I think the majority of them probably feel he's not deporting enough. I hear that all the time on X. I see that all the time with individuals on the right saying that he's just not deporting enough. And to be honest, I'm one of them. But I'm here and I'm like, okay, in some areas, sure, maybe he's using too much power. In other areas, maybe he's not using enough power. I don't know. Like there's way too much nuance to this. So I don't really like this question, to be honest, but we're still going to talk about it. A slight majority of Utah voters agree President Donald Trump is exercising too much power, despite the president garnering positive job approval ratings in the state. Voters are split on whether the other branches of government are exerting too much power, too little, or just the right amount of power in Trump's administration. So, and then just for context, this is coming after November 5th, the U.S. Supreme Court is November 5th is in the past. They heard arguments as to whether or not Trump can use these broad tariffs under the power that he has chosen, which is under the IEEPA. I forget what it stands for exactly, but it's the Emergency Powers Act, basically, where he is granted emergency powers. He stated that there's a national emergency, therefore I get to use the broad powers of tariffs to be able to enforce to be able to course correct for this national emergency. Those arguments were presented before the U.S. Supreme Court. They're going to hear it. They're going to announce at some point what their decision is on the matter. So we're not there yet. And I'll try to do a video on that if I think it matters. So the situation here is, I think most people, let's scroll down here to the poll, think about how much power leaders have at a federal level. Do you think President Trump is exercising too much, just the right amount, not enough, or don't know? I look at this and I just go, okay, the majority of people that are saying that are looking at probably one of like 4 issues. Maybe it's the tariffs, maybe it's and it's probably a slight combination of them all, of the 4, but I think generally they're going to glean onto 1 or 2 of these, that it's either the tariffs that they're really upset about, it's way too much power, it's the deployment of the National Guard, it's ICE immigration enforcement, and I think what's going on with the boats down in Venezuela. So we have these 4 situations. I think the majority of people are looking at that. We're going to have some off the cuff. People are going to be like, he's exercising too much power in this specific area. That, of course, is happening. But like on the national side and what I hear and see going on X, and just Utah news and things, it comes down to like those 4, right? Those are the 4 big things that's getting all the news that everyone's really paying attention to. And I think most normies are going to be looking at those 4 things. That's who's voting too much power. Now, Utah, 60% of Utah voted for Donald Trump, while 38% voted for Kamala Harris. I'm going to make an assumption, and I'm possibly wrong, but I kind of don't feel that I am, that all 38% of them would vote that he's using too much power. So if you get rid of that 38, not to say that they're not important, I'm saying if you get rid of them, at least 14%, which would be other independents and or Republicans that feel he's using too much power. And if you compare that to just the right amount of power, I don't see any Democrat that's going to be in this point, maybe a few independents. So the vast bulk of Republicans are either not enough power, don't know, or just the right amount of power, but the bulk of them are in the just the right amount of power. I think that's why he's getting good approval ratings, because like it just depends on who you look at. And we're so bifurcated at this point that the left just feels that no matter what Donald Trump says, it's wrong. The right, back when Biden was president, they felt no matter what he did was wrong. Of course, there's going to be some nuance and people need to talk about that, but here we are. So let's look at the next part. Congress is currently exercising too much power, just the right amount of power, not enough power, or don't know. And I think this is actually where we should put most of our focus in. And it's not whether or not they use too much power or the right enough or not enough. Like, honestly, they've punted all their responsibility to the executive branch or to the judiciary. Congress the Senate, they just want to stay in power for as long as possible. The majority of them, I don't feel actually have a moral character. The majority of them seem to just want to remain in power and do everything they can to please the bureaucrats and the large donors and everyone that's giving to their PACs and things to help make things happen, that are controlling interests, I should say, whatever they are, whoever they are. We can get into the conspiracy or just regular folk or whatever. There's, a vast majority, but what I'm trying to say is the vast majority, I think, have been co-opted. They're not actually representing the people who voted for them. That's my take, because there are some things that Republicans and Democrats do actually agree on, even if it's little, as in, let's get rid of the staying stupid daylight savings. Get rid of it. Why can't the time stay the same? Why can't we all just be like Arizona? You have one time, it never changes. Why does it ever have to change? No one wants it. Congress could just simply be like, okay, it's done, and just pass it, but they don't. Why? Because there's other interests that they care about instead of actually appeasing those who vote for them, which to me shows, well, the people who vote for them don't actually control what they're doing. So something's wrong with our system. And that's my problem, is they keep punting off to the executive branch by passing bills that are too vague. They will say, hey, we want X and my party wants X. Hey guys, you know how you want X? Well, we're going to give you X. Executive branch, do X and make sure that Y happens with X. So they pass X bill and they give some vague response like, make sure that everyone is safe. That's the bill. Everyone has to be safe. If you work in, if you're a bus driver, we just want bus drivers to be safe. Enact rules. So then the agency goes and they get to make whatever rule they want. Unencumbered. There's no way to stop them from Congress unless Congress wants to pass a specific law to say, well, not that, which never happens. And so we've had this problem where they've punted all of their ability over to the agencies, the executive branch, saying you deal with it. And so honestly, when I see this, I'm like, first and foremost, is Donald Trump exercising too much power? I think on principle he is, because I think based on the original Constitution, there is some overstepping. I don't think everything. I think the deployment of the National Guard is well within his purview. There's going to be some nuance in there of maybe specific actions that could be, because I know he's getting sued. We'll see where that goes. Same thing with like ICE, right? Enforcement, deportations, that's well within the purview. Those are the laws that have been presented that he's allowed to do. But again, we get down to the nuance, and that's the point, is I think most people are looking at this nuance of too much power, and I think on principle, he is exercising too much power because the executive branch in and of itself is just way bigger than the Constitution ever originally wanted, and I think the majority of Americans actually feel that it is too big, especially when it's harming their side, right? And so we kind of get down to the truth doesn't matter to partisans. If you're a partisan, you just feel that no matter what Joe Biden does, it's wrong. If you're a leftist, no matter what Donald Trump does, it's wrong. I would love to be able to move away from that. There's plenty of areas that I've agreed with individuals that I've talked to on the left, independents, even in Utah, right? There's a lot that we can agree upon, but there's like so much infighting and outfighting and just everything going on that like no one can just focus in and be like, hey, this is what the American people want. Let's just do this. So my point in bringing this up is there's a bill called the REINS Act that our own Senator Mike Lee proposed with Senator Rand Paul. I kind of wanted to go through this bill. So if you don't care for the nitty gritty, I'm going to pull up the text of the bill. I'm not going to like read it all, but I'm going to read portions of it and try to summarize it so you can hopefully get some explanation and then my thoughts at the end, or probably during. So today, Senator Mike Lee, today being February 6th, joined Senator Rand Paul as a co-sponsor of the regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny REINS Act. This legislation would require that federal regulations with an economic impact of $100 million or more be subject to an up or down vote in Congress, reclaiming legislative power from the regulatory state. So in other words, when they said, hey, vague thing, keep bus drivers safe, and then they say all buses have to have reinforced extra super duper best steel ever, and it's going to cost us hundreds of millions of dollars. We want that because that will keep our bus drivers safe, and that's what you tasked us to do. Effectively, this will force Congress, if it costs more than $100 million, to vote on it and say, yeah, we do want that, or no, we don't. So it's kind of a check on an ability to veto the executive branch. I think it's smart in theory. So let's read some of the text. So this is Bill. I was looking around. Bill 485, Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny Act. So in need of scrutiny, I love that. So here we go. The Section 801 right here, Congressional Review. So quick cap of this, quick summary, is this is the rules that govern the agency. So the agency has to submit to the Federal Registry. So I'm going to read this first section and a few of the subsections there. Before a rule may take effect, the federal agency promulgating such rule shall publish in the Federal Register a list of information on which the rule is based, including data, scientific and economic studies, and cost-benefit analysis, and identify how the public can access such information online, and shall submit to the House of the Congress and the Comptroller General a report containing the rule, general statements, classification of rule, including the explanation of the classification, specifically addressing which criteria, major rules. We'll go through what a major rule is later, a list of other ideas. So effectively, this is just the rule that they have to submit. So agencies will have to submit to Congress, big or small, that 100 million I mentioned earlier doesn't matter here. They have to submit the rule to Congress through the Federal Registry. Then there are rules that break that up. And we'll get into the rules later. It's Section 804 that goes over the actual rule of making something a major rule versus a minor rule. The minor rules kind of can just happen, and then there's some time frames in here. So the Comptroller General shall provide a report on each major rule to the Committee of Jurisdiction by the end of a 15-day calendar after the submission. This is to like make sure that it gets in front of Congress. They get there's somewhere in here like a major rule may take effect for 190 calendar day period if the president makes a determination under paragraph 2 to submit written. Oh yeah, so there's a rule in here, the 60 days. That's what I was really trying to find. So in the case of the Senate, 60 session days, or in the case of the House, 60 legislative days. So they get 60 days of their working to be able to determine whether or not and to have to vote on it. So Section 1 is the rule that says you have to submit. The legislature, get the option to look at the rule that you have submitted and help classify it as a major rule and or just leave it as a minor rule, and then it can go through, but they can still veto it. And that's what Section 2 is. Well, no, Section 2 isn't the, sorry, 802 is the, it's the approval process. That's what I was looking for. So this is, yeah, congressional approval. I should just write it right there. Congressional approval procedure for major rules. So this is the rules for the major side. The minor side was just covered above. Basically, they just, if it's a minor rule, if it doesn't affect more than 100 million and there's not a significant change to certain things, then it can go forward. Just make sure that we're aware of the change that you're implementing. It has to go to the Federal Registry. If it is turns out to be larger than, this is the approval process. I'm not going to get into it. They basically just say how it has to go to Congress. They still have the 60 days. The Senate still has to look at it. There was one point in here, though, that I wanted to do. It's right here. The motion is not subject to amendment or to a motion to postpone or to a motion to proceed to the consideration of other business. A motion to reconsider the vote by which the motion is agreed to or disagreed to shall not be in order. If a motion to proceed to the consideration of the joint resolution is agreed to, the joint resolution shall remain the unfinished business of the Senate until disposed of. This is saying they cannot amend or change it. The agency is still allowed to submit their rules. Congress has revoked their ability to say we want it changed. They just have the power to say, yes, we're okay with it, or no, we're not moving forward with this change. Pros and cons. One of the pros is it means that if they do want it, they can just pass it through quickly and they don't have to worry about like any changes or someone trying to make some minor change and having to discuss that. Part of the issue is like, what if we really do need to reinforce the buses and everyone agrees like, yeah, buses are killing our bus drivers and this is super important. We need that reinforced steel and we need it now. Well, now they can't amend it to be like, well, let's make sure that it's this type of steel or whatever. They just have to look at it and be like, you know what? The people want it. Let's vote for this. Boom, go. One of the cons to that is sometimes it means they're going to make concession that maybe they didn't want to, right? It's the compromise phase where you're like, well, the people want it, but I don't like this one little thing, but fine, we're going to let it go through, and they let it go through. So pros and cons, but I do like the idea that they can't just like keep it in the process of the Senate forever. They can't just be like, well, I don't like it or whatever, and we're going to filibuster. We're going to do all these other weird things. It's like, no, just vote on it. Yes or no. Then we scroll down to Section 803. This is the disapproval or veto process. So if after the 60 days, For the major rules, they have no force or effect right there. And such rules shall have no force or effect. So if they let it default for 60 days, if they don't do anything, if Congress or the Senate don't vote on it, it cannot become law, and it goes back to the agency, and they can, I guess, resubmit it or do whatever they need to do. But Congress, if they don't vote on it, it is an automatic denial, meaning they can't move forward. I really like that. There's also some other rules on just being able to vote no or whatever. So then we get to section 804. This is the definition section where they define things, but this is important because right here, the term major rule. So this means any rule, including an interim final rule that the administrator the administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs of the Office of Management and Budget finds has resulted in or is likely to result in an annual effect on the economy of 100 million or more. So I like this because it's a stingent number. It's a real number. It matters because the other two reasons are not real numbers. A major increase in cost or prices for consumers. What's considered major? Is 25% considered major? Is 50%? Is a 100% increase? Like, where is the line for major? Individuals, industries, federal, state, or local government agencies, or geographic regions. I like the idea of geographic regions, so that way, like, if it does affect one area, we got to talk about it. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I like the idea that it's like, hey, it's going to affect the Southwest, or it's going to affect the Northeast or whatever. This forces it into a discussion to be like, we got to talk about it. Significant adverse effects on competition, employment, investment, productivity, innovation, or the ability of the United States-based enterprise to compete with foreign-based enterprises in domestic and export markets. So in theory, I like this idea. The problem, again, is down to this word significant. How do we define significant? It's not defined in this bill. It just exists out there, which means it's left up to the discretionary decision of those who make the decisions. And that's part of the issue where we get into section 805, judicial review. I really like this first one. The no determination, finding, actions, or omission under this chapter shall be subject to judicial review. So if Congress decides to vote no or whatever, if they make a decision, any of their decisions cannot be sued for their decision making. B is a court may determine whether the federal agency has completed the necessary requirements under this chapter for a rule to take effect. So that's procedural grounds. If for some reason the procedure wasn't followed correctly, and that's what scares me, is it means what is defined as significant. And if they want to say it's not significant, they can take that before a judge. And now the judge can rule whether or not the increase is significant or not and get the law changed. Pros and cons, it's a check and balance. So I'm not completely against it, but I wish we had something more than like just the word significant. I don't know how you do that. So maybe it's the best bet we can take. Then we have section 806, which the affirmative defense. So it shall be the affirmative defense against an alleged violation of the rule for a defendant in any administration preceding the federal agency or before the court of the United States if any individual of ordinary intelligence could not anticipate from the statutory language of the provision or law purported to form the basis for the rule in question that the conduct of the individual would be unlawful. So, funness. There was another area in here I wanted to find. There is a sunset clause in here. I just can't remember where it is, but there is an expiration for the majority rules. Yeah, the rest of it is just more rules. I didn't want to go over those. Those were the points that I wanted to really stand out here. So effectively, there is a rule. Here's my shortened summary. There's a rule. This would be a rule that agencies have to file to the Federal Registry if it is determined to be a major rule change, 100 million more, or significant change, whatever that is defined as. Then Congress has to vote on whether or not they want that rule change. All for that. Then you can't sue based on their decision, but you can sue based on procedural grounds, which I think would imply the word significant because now it is procedural. It's like, no, ours is not, it's not significant. We did it on purpose. This shouldn't have been ruled as, right? It's not following the procedure. It is not a major rule. So that's how they could override it. The other issue is whoever's determining it, if they are extremely partisan or just really want something to pass, they could just not label it and just be like, no, that's not significant, regardless of whether or not they think it is. They could just change it. So there's some pros. That's my only critique of the bill, but you're going to have a critique on every bill, and I find them acceptable is really my determination here. So overall, Americans, if Donald Trump is using too much power, maybe push to rein it in a little bit. And I think this is a good first step. I'm going to leave it there. If you disagree with anything I said, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Let me know. You can find me on X if you'd like to debate me or, push back or actually have a conversation at Reese J. Crockett. You can also find me on YouTube and Rumble at Reese J. Crockett, or the channel is just called Reese Crockett. And until next time.